our final session today. We saved the best for last. No, I shouldn't say that because they've all been amazing. Every single panel has been so amazing and so insightful and so much information for all of us to learn from or take home with us. So this is going to be a fireside chat with one of my favorite people. I have known Helen for 24 years. Where is she? Is she hiding? Oh, there she is. Hey, come on. Yes, so come on down, Helen.
I think it's been longer than 24 May.
Well, you know when it was. I'll tell you exactly how we met. So it was in 2020 when I was a co-host for Oprah's new channel back then. It was called Oxygen Media, based in New York. And it was all about women and women's empowerment. You can see a common theme here in my life. And so Helen, I begged my executive producer to invite Helen on the show because she had just come out with her book, Asian Americans.
Dreams.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I read it and I was so moved by the book because I'd never read a book like this, right? Nobody had really authored a book about Asian Americans and sort of our journey. And so I begged my EP to bring her on the show. She was very resistant. Have I told you the story?
No, you didn't tell me about your resistant EP.
I think I read.
What's her name? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, I think I wrote about this in my book, in my first book. So, because it was kind of traumatic. She was so resistant because 2020, they didn't bring Asian authors on a show. It was like weird enough that there was an Asian co-host of a talk show back then. So we did this interview. She moved me to tears during the interview. And afterwards, my EP was like, yeah, that was okay. You know? yeah. And I still remember that. It kind of scarred me a little bit, but ever since then, I admired Helen for all that she did, and I followed her all these years. I've interviewed her on my podcast. We've done events together.
And this woman is incredible. May is she's this pioneer. She's been blazing the trail. She's an amazing journalist, speaker, writer, teacher herself. So
this whole fireside chat is just going to be us like talking about how great we are. Yeah,
Mutual admiration society. That's what we have.
Yeah, and we're also Silver Sisters. So I decided with this fireside chat, it's just like, man, Helen has decades of experience in activism and journalism and writing, and she's still so active. And I have a lot of experience in journalism, having lived around the world and seen a lot of things, and then become this accidental activist, during COVID. And so this is kind of like an OG session, right? The two of us are now at an age.
Speak for yourself, May.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. But the two of us now are at an age, and I always say this, where we don't give a F anymore about what people think, what people say, any of that. And that gives us such freedom to really speak up about anything because I don't care what you think, It is that kind of attitude. Yeah, look at these. Yeah, right? Right.
Yeah, right.
So this is what we're going to do today. We're just going to kind of just think out loud, talk out loud about all sorts of issues, but particularly going along with the theme about, Asian women and where we're at, where we've come from, and where we need to go. Right. So, Helen, let's start with where are we now? I mean, look, we've gone through a traumatic couple of years. We know this, right, with the Asian hate and the COVID. And we're still hearing, earlier we heard from Hong and Michelle Lee, saying that we're still seeing these incidents, against Asians. So where do you think we're at now after all these past couple of years? And then you started with Vincent Chin, so you've seen it for the many decades, in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think for many of us, we look at this where we are today and just think, has it ever been worse? And I just want to say, yes, it has been worse. It has been worse. Anti-Asian hate, I mean, one of the things that was shocking to me in 2020 was not that it was here, but that so many people were surprised, even Asian Americans.
Yeah.
And that was very surprising to me, but it shouldn't have been because we've been, drinking that toxic poison all along too that just said, Asian Americans, everything's so great, you're the model minority, you're the model, you're the good minority. bad things don't happen to you. And even though we might know on a conscious level that that's not true, because we can look at our own families and our own lives, still we absorb some of that.
Yeah.
And so to see so many people just say, I never knew this could happen to me. It's like, it can happen to you, and it's happening, and where we are today is bad. It has been worse in history, but that's the thing. If we, I write about history, I love history, I think a lot of you do too, and it's that we can't forget the past, because the past will teach us about the future, about the present and the future, and the fact that, if we can only imagine, we're here in San Francisco, the city where the Chinese Exclusion Act and all of the Asian Exclusion Acts began. They began here.
Right.
You can see those, etchings that show hundreds of thousands of people in front of the city hall, all saying, Chinese must go. And then lynchings and massacres. One of the biggest massacres, lynchings that ever happened in the country was the Chinese in LA and the destruction of so many Chinatowns. And earlier in one of the panels, Michelle Lee, who is here.
Right.
There's Michelle. Michelle was talking about being in the Midwest and in St. Louis, and there's Chinatown there that was eliminated in 1960, but it was all there for 100 years, and we don't know these things.
Yep.
And so just saying history moves in cycles. I think we are in a bad place. I think if you have an Asian face, yellow or brown, East Asian, Southeast Asian, South Asian, we are all moving targets. The Islamophobia that brought out more intensely the Islamophobia that exists in this world, and there have been so many deaths of South Asian Sikh Americans. That hasn't gone away. And then for East Asians, it's not that there have, and Southeast Asians, it's not that there has ever been a time that there wasn't anti-Asian hate or violence. And in fact, I did want to, forgive me, I just want to show this Vincent Chin Legacy Guide. One of the parts of it is even just showing, over the years, you might know the name Vincent Chin. And now, because of Monthanis's hard work and the Vicha Ratanapakdi Foundation, people know, in some areas at least, Vicha Ratanapakdi's name. But there have been hundreds, dozens, countless Asian Americans who have been attacked, killed. And one of the things we highlight is what happened. What happened after? It's not just the event, but so your question, where we are today, we're in a bad place, no question about it. And if you think about history moving in cycles or in pendulums or whatever, we are sort of at a low point. But the thing to remember is we come out of them. The time when Vincent Chin was killed was the last, I would say, big wave of anti-Asian hate. It was directed against Japan. It was because Japan was the enemy of America, because they were
taking over economically, right? So,
they had a strong economy. They built fuel-efficient cars when we had cars that,
gas guzzlers.
That got 6 miles a gallon.
Yeah.
and I lived and worked in Detroit. I was an auto worker for Chrysler. And we made that junk, and we knew we were making garbage. You'd spend all day working and everything, and an inspector would come and spray red paint on it because it was all crap. And so anyway, that was a terrible time. And those of you who are old enough to remember, and those who aren't, ask your parents about it. You could not get a job in those days. It was a recession that went on for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
And people just, when you got laid off, like I did, and millions of other people did, you didn't know whether you would ever get a job again. And so that led to the frustration of people lashing out. And anybody.
Yeah, and that's happening again. There's the frustration, deprivation. It makes people fearful. And then when you have a certain somebody stoking that fear and creating that narrative.
And his minions. He's not alone.
Who are we talking about? I don't know.
Right.
The person who shall remain nameless. So that back then was the same thing. So you're saying it's cyclical. But here's where I get kind of depressed.
But wait, before you talk about depressed,
okay,
we come out of it. We came out of that.
I know, but that's why I was going to say.
We came out of that. But it doesn't happen magically.
No.
Okay, all right, okay. What makes you
now I'm going to be like the
depressed?
cynical journalist, right? Yeah. It's just that history just keeps on freaking repeating itself, and that's where I'm like, do we not learn from history? My answer is not really, right? When it keeps on happening, the same there are kids here, so the same stuff keeps happening, right? And when you start really learning about history, especially when it comes to Asian American history, it is astounding how we keep doing the same thing, keep dismissing, invisibilizing, and marginalizing. So.
And that is the lesson. Yeah. I mean, in these past 40 years, 60 years really, or so since the civil rights movement that gave rise to voting rights, the right for women to choose and have, control over our bodies, so many civil rights. The Immigration Act of 1965 that allowed most of us and our families here to come here.
Yep.
And to see that all being rolled back, attempts to roll it back. What happened? Part of it is, I think, not only did we become complacent, we believed the propaganda that was coming out that was saying, oh, civil rights is over. Race, why talk about race? It's over. Why talk about sexism or women's rights? It's over. Right. And so we can just sort of like coast into the future. Mm-hmm. Well, while people were believing that we could coast into the future, there have been billions of dollars sunk into think tanks that said, well, you know what, let's keep saying that Asians are the model minority. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was a kid, there was no model minority. We were the evil, enemy aliens coming to destroy America. That hasn't gone away. But now I do think the dominant narrative is everybody thinks that, oh, Asians are better than white people. I mean, we're healthier than white people. We have no problems. We're richer than white people. And none of that is true. I mean, how many people here know that the one racial group in New York City, in the 8 to 10 million people in New York City, that it has the highest poverty rate?
Yep.
Who is that? It's Asian Americans. Yep. And that isn't even a blip in the, media communications ethos. It's nobody believes that. But, so we can't let that happen again. And the way we not let that happen again is we learn from that. Well, first of all, the whole country, if you care about democracy, you have to stand up. But besides that,
you got to vote.
You have to vote. You have to register. Yeah. Talk to all your friends and family, especially those in swing states where Asian Americans really made a difference and flipped to,
Yeah, that statistic that just came out, the Asian eligible voter grew by 15% versus the general population grew by 3%. That's huge, you guys. Can you imagine? So that could really make a difference in an election.
And especially the younger generation, the basically millennials, Gen X, Y, Z, those of you who think like we didn't mess this country up, it's all of you old people with the gray hair. But it's your future. And, we could talk about where we were at in younger days. And, I have to say, long time ago. But actually, when I first was able to vote, I was like, why vote? All these people, we should end racism today. We should end the war today. We should, give, and none of these people are saying that. And, one of the things is as you get a few more gray hairs, you realize things are not that simple. Things are complicated. And yes, your vote really does count.
Yeah.
And I see today that a lot of, especially millennial and Gen, it's sort of like, I don't like any of the people running, and I can't say I love any of them either.
Yeah.
But it does make a difference.
Yeah.
And that guy, day one, he has already said, I'm going to intern and deport like how many millions of people? You know, if we thought the elimination of Roe v. Wade was bad, it's going to get worse. In states like Indiana, where they criminalize women who have abortions for any reason, even medical, the 2 women who have gone to jail are Asian women. And so
I didn't know that.
a South Asian and an East Asian woman. And they've been prosecuted. And that's what's going to be happening. And so just, you know, so yes, it's bad. It can be worse. The only thing that makes things better is if we rise up with our voices, our vote, in any way that we have to just speak up and say, you know, we're not invisible. We are not that, you know, whatever stereotype they have. And these T-shirts, Asian women are strong. Asians are strong. Asian Americans are strong.
Yeah.
And we have to show that in every way we can.
We do. But here's the thing, Helen, and I think some panelists earlier were talking about this. There's fatigue, right? There's fatigue now because we have been fighting, you know, you've been fighting forever, right? I mean, and kind of so have I through the journalism work. But this intense 3 or 4 years that we've been through, it's been exhausting, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And I know that I have felt really depleted at times, where I'm like, I can't keep doing this anymore. You know, how much longer do we have to keep doing this? And I would imagine that's probably how you felt back in, you know, the 80s with the whole Vincent Chin thing. Yeah. So that's something, let's talk about that. I mean, like, how do we combat that exhaustion, that fatigue, that activism fatigue, you know, that protesting fatigue? And then now we're up against a situation this year with the election. It's just like, geez, I mean, I'm like, I'm moving. I'm leaving the country. You know, you hear that a lot, but I'm kind of like, I'm leaving the country if it happens. I mean, so talk about that. Like, you've had this experience for a long time.
Yeah, it does get tiring, and the only way you deal with it is you build an army. You don't do it yourself. Yeah. That army might be you and, you know, your 5 best friends. You know, the folks that you call up when you want support. You know, the panel that was just here was saying, you know, the girlfriend network. Yeah. Where when you feel really down and you think, I can't do this anymore, oh boy, I got treated like shit at work today, or, you know, my kids are driving me crazy. I can't stand it anymore, and you call your friends up and they all say, you know, you're great, keep going, you know, or let's get a drink, or whatever they say. And to change the world, to change what's happening, to get a street light, you know, where you need it, or anything like that, it means, you know, don't do it alone. Because every one of us is going to have times where it's like, oh, I don't know, or how can I do this? And you might need to take a break, a breather, you know, and you have people who have your back, who say, okay, you go ahead, I'll go to that meeting for you, you know, I'll take notes for you, you know, that's one of the reasons, you know, at my age, I've established the Vincent Chin Institute last year. I mean, my wife Leah said to me, Helen, do you really want to have a baby, the Vincent Chin Institute, at this point in your life, with all that gray hair you have? Yeah. And I'm like, no, I don't want to have a baby. I'm 72 this year. I'm a dragon, by the way. This is my year. And it's like, no, at 72, it's a bad idea to have a baby. At least in my case. I mean, if you want one, please do, you know, but the idea is, you know, my group that started, you know, the work around Vincent Chin, we didn't work hard enough to get a new generation to take it on. So it's sort of like, okay, we have to do this. My personal goal is to get the replacement troops for it, but that's the thing. That's what we have to do. And if we have things that give us joy, or at least, you know, give our brains a break where we can just sort of have a joyful fantasy. Fun fact about me, I got a cargo van, a very small little white van, you know, like a transit. It's actually, and it was empty. I bought it, and I'm actually pretty good with power tools because I grew up in a home where a Chinese American immigrant family, we made stuff in our house. my father created this thing where we made stuff, us kids, him and my mom, and we used drills, saws, all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I went to IKEA and bought, the cheapest set of cabinets that I then modified to go into the van. It is my Armageddon mobile. And so my fantasy is that if the unthinkable happens,
Yeah.
I can drive north or I can drive south. I'll have to worry about what happens at the border because they don't want all of us, But they're going to build a wall against the Americans. And so,
Oh my God.
So anyway.
So you're ready.
Yeah.
You're kind of ready.
Well,
is it stocked with like food and stuff? And
it has enough room for it. That's
Really?
the idea. You need more space than you can fit into a car. So then you can throw all the.
see, you got an escape plan.
It is sort of, but
Okay, and this is okay. We're not trying to be pessimistic here, but so let's be a little bit more optimistic in terms of really takeaway information. Look, we have a lot of people here who are activated. You're clearly here because you care, right? You're spending your Sunday here. So we all do it, do our activism or whatever community service in different ways. But in this crucial year, where a lot is at stake, right? What do you think we should be doing then? Seriously, what should we be doing?
A lot of you are doing it already. I mean, that's why you're here. But it's connecting. It's making up your lists of people that you think could be doing something that are not. Or that, your family, making plans for these, your extended family. And so the number one is the elections are coming up. If that's not your thing, there really are a lot, if we went around this room, I'm sure there are like at least a few hundred different organizations that all of you are connected to. Mm-hmm. And they might not be advocacy groups. They could be your church, your club, your alumni group, your PTA, or any of those things. But all of these topics have to be discussed. We have to find the people. The last panel, they said, find the people. You don't have to convince everybody into becoming believers.
Find the people who already believe.
But find the believers too, and connect with them, and that will also help reduce, all the feeling of burden on yourself.
Right.
But connect with those people. Think about ways that the Honorable John Lewis, civil rights leader, had said. Find ways to make good trouble. Find ways where in your community something needs to happen, and that might be about getting the vote out. That might be about doing things about, the justice for, for Vicha, Ratanapakti, or educating around hate crimes, justice for Yikwoi Huang, and Susanna Yi is here too. I mean, we know that, I'm really involved in trying to fight anti-Asian hate, as well as build multiracial coalitions. I mean, building coalitions, that's huge. Mm-hmm. Any way you can find to do that. And make ourselves visible, make ourselves heard. I think for Asian Americans, and especially for Asian American women, the invisibility, it's so pervasive in this society. I mean, you can stand there, and I've done this. I've actually had presentations where I've given a whole presentation, given PowerPoints, and somebody will come up to me and say at the end, well, but I don't think Asian Americans really were ever part of the civil rights movement. And I'm like, I just showed you pictures of it and spoke about it for a half an hour, and you don't, where can I start? But so that might be a person who's not a believer, so let me find the believers then. But it really, that I think speaks to the invisibility we have. And the only way to fight invisibility is for us to stand up, make ourselves loud and visible in every sphere we can, to be, to quote a movie I think I saw, everything, everywhere, all at once. We have to do that in every multiverse, okay? So that's what we have to do.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's, I think, I completely agree. I think that's why I was saying it can be exhausting. And that's why you're suggesting, I think, obviously build the army, build those relationships, build those alliances, with others, because you can't do it alone. But that's what we tend to do, though. I think I said this earlier, as Asians, especially from immigrant families, we tend to think we do have to do it on our own, right? Nobody's going to help us. And we certainly don't want to ask for help, because I remember my parents saying, don't ask for help, right? Don't ask strangers for help, because you don't want to owe them, and you can do it on your own. So it just made us tougher in many ways, of course, and more resilient, but it also created, for me, I can only speak for myself, it did sort of create this sort of gap of me thinking, if I don't do it myself, then then nobody will do it, and I can't ask for help, because that is weakness, right?
Yeah.
We got to change that mindset for sure.
I think that has a lot of mythology that we internalize too. I mean, when you look at a lot of the Asian businesses that form, and people say, well, how is it that Asians are able to set up these businesses or buy homes and things like that? It actually is through mutual aid. Tanamoshi, or what is it?
Ke,
Hui,
in Korean,
or
ke. Yeah, it's
and
you collect
so
all the money. Yeah.
so many of the Asian cultures really do have that mutual support, pool their money, pool their resources, help each other one at a time. So the idea that we would have to do it alone is really not true. And I think that goes in hand with the idea that, well, Asians are just not political. Why would we be political? And that's why we're so quiet. And I'm like, excuse me, have you ever looked over in Asia? Do you see what happens in the diet, in the parliaments?
Taiwan, where they're like, it's like a rumble in parliament.
People are slitting their wrists and writing opposition signs in their own blood. And then they're going and beating each other up because they are so passionate about their beliefs and what is right in their
Okay,
culture.
but that's interesting you bring that up. That's in Asia, right? So it's in their culture, their home ground, right? But then when we immigrate here, we're the outsider. We're the foreigner. Right. So therefore, that's probably why it doesn't translate. Right. It hasn't been able. Well, now it is, but before it didn't translate. So that's why they felt like, no, we're not going to make waves. Can't make waves.
Well, right. But that still persists. Even though,
it does.
I mean, that was when we were less than 0.1% of the country. That's one thing. Now we have, 24 million, more than 24 million. Somebody cited, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, it's like 35% Asian population. The state of California, I think it's somewhere around 20%.
Are we now 7 or 8% of the population?
Of the total U.S. population, it's 6 to 7%,
yeah.
And that includes places, so there's no part of America where there are no Asians anymore. I mean, when I was a kid in New Jersey, it was really like, oh, you're an alien from outer space.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we felt. Right. But it's not like that anymore. So this thing of it persisting that, well, we're quiet. Well, okay, what happened when people left where they were and came here, and by the way, did that because it's sort of like I feel like saying to the U.S. government and military, we're here because you were there. That's why, because people wouldn't have left their homelands if things were great. And if you destroy the country militarily or ecologically or anything like that, and you make it impossible for people to leave, they go elsewhere. And so, but the thing is, coming here, we become colonized people. There are other people sort of telling us who we are, what we can do, what our lives should be like, that we have to be the quiet people, because we'll be good if we're the quiet people. We'll maybe get elevated. And all of that is taking away our own ability to, to really fulfill who we are and be full human beings. I mean, I feel like that robs us of our humanity.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, all of that stuff. Be quiet, don't be the nail that stands up, you'll get hammered down, don't make waves, don't embarrass your family, don't stand out. All of those things, it's not cultural. It's ways that maybe people think we can survive better if we do that. But then you're like the ostrich with your head in the sand and your butt all sticking up, you know, and no, you're not safer that way, you know. So.
Yeah. So let's touch on the whole idea of, you know, why we're all here. We're trying to talk about celebrating Asian women, but the challenges that we faced, right? And Helen, I admire so much because you're Asian, you're a woman, and you're openly gay, you know, and during a time many decades ago when that was not accepted at all, right? So it was like the triple whammy for you. So can you kind of tell us your personal experience of having to deal with being three minorities, basically, at a tumultuous time, and now that's even under threat, right? Who knows what's going to happen, you know, depending on the outcome of the election. You know, again, that they could, gay marriage could be out the window. You know, obviously,
I'm sure it's on the checklist,
right? And then they're talking about the IVF, you know, in Alabama, and I think Missouri's considering it too, right, Michelle? Yeah. So these are things that are really going to affect so many of us. So can you share your personal experience of having to kind of deal with these barriers and these challenges, and to prepare us perhaps for fighting this again, you know?
Well, you know, there's so many parts of today where people were saying that we, you know, we're Asian, we're women, you know, people talked about growing up poor, being immigrants or from immigrant families, and in this society, I mean, American culture likes to classify things, right? European culture, you know, whereas a lot of Asian cultures, it's much more integrated, what we call intersectional. And so, you know, we grow up thinking, well, I'll check off this box, you know, I mean, you know, when I was a kid, the only races were white and black. I mean, when Vincent Chin was killed, his police report says he was white because it was either white or black. And that's how they collected statistics then. So that wasn't that long ago. I mean, this whole idea that we are actually, you know, have multiple identities, but really we're one person. It's just that they're all in there together. So growing up, I mean, it was very clear that I was Chinese American. You know, people looked at me, and I did grow up with people saying all the time, go back where you came from.
Yeah.
You know, that was just like a given, you know, and so knowing that I didn't fit in, you know, racially in America made me wonder, am I really American? You know, I'd never been to China, but should I go back there? You know, and
where is it?
I know, right? I don't speak. My father told my mother, don't speak Chinese to the kids; they'll get discriminated against. So I grew up monolingual. You know, and I wish he had never said that to my mom. But anyway, so that identity was very clear. The being a girl, growing up as a, you know, a girl in a very patriarchal family, you know, very dad-oriented, old school Chinese traditional family. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, that was that Confucian thing. The wife obeys the husband. The girl obeys the father. The wife obeys the husband. The widow obeys the sons. And that was the thing that always got me, because I have 4 brothers, and I thought, why should mom ever have to obey them? You know, but seeing the disparities. I mean, my mother really was treated as the handmaiden to my father. Mm-hmm. And my father didn't want me to go to college at a certain point. After I had gotten a full scholarship to go to Princeton, he was like, no, you know what? The proper place for an unmarried Chinese girl is to stay at home. Until when? Until, of course, he could palm me off to a man who I would have to obey, and in that case, I would still be at home, in the kitchen, like, you know, like, okay, that wasn't going to happen, and you know, so realizing those, but the part about, you know, when you're questioning. When I was a kid, there was no questioning. You know, the gay rights, you know, LGBTQ movement really did bring on the idea that, we might have our sexual orientation and identity, develops. And some people know from the time that they're born, that they're gay, straight, lesbian, another, gender. And so in my case, I think I knew, actually, when I was about 5. I remember there was a neighbor woman who came and said, "Oh, little girl, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Married?" And I was like, "No," like, no. And so I think, I think I was about 4 or 5, but I do remember that question. And we were like, "No," and maybe it was at that point that I knew. But then you grow up, the social
Programming
and all of that stuff, and then when I was at that point of just out of college and really, just the whole gay, what was then called the gay liberation movement was beginning. And there was a book that came out, Our Bodies, Ourselves. Some of you might remember this. This was, you were talking earlier on one of the panels about just women knowing their bodies even. And it had a chapter on lesbians, and it had a picture of lesbians in it. And none of them were Asian, but I looked at them and I was like, "Oh, wow, maybe that's like me." And so, that was the beginning of my, and then I threw myself also into the women's liberation movement was happening then. That was very active. And what happened was I had a lesbian trial by my Asian American and Black community activists. We were in a room maybe half the size of this. We were having a meeting. We had a special meeting. I had been going to women's movement meetings where we would have like 300 women from all over the Boston area show up and talk about, equal pay for equal work and things like that. And they called me to this meeting, and it was the Black and Asian activists from my, the community I lived in, where we were making trouble. And anyway, they said, "Helen, come here." And they sat me in the middle of a semicircle. They were all sitting here. And I was like, "Okay, what's up here?" And they're like, "Well, Helen, we've noticed that you're hanging around with a lot of lesbians. And we need to know if you're one, because there are no homosexuals in the Black community." And then the Asian, leader steps up and he says, "That's right. If you are a homosexual, we would not want to have anything to do with you because you would bring shame, you would bring discredit to our movement. So tell us, Helen, are you a lesbian?" Now, I was at that point where it was really, I was, questioning. I never had a girlfriend, never held hands. I didn't have Ellen DeGeneres' membership card or the toaster oven or anything like that. And also what they were saying was every woman in the women's movement was a lesbian, which was also something meant to discredit the women's movement.
Yeah.
But so I was all of 20, and I sat there thinking, wow, am I a lesbian? I don't know how to answer that. But if I say yes, I am out of my community.
God,
so
wow.
I said no. And so I said no. And this is the power of words, where we can use words to elevate ourselves and say, we can do this. I said, no, I'm not. So it was sort of stepping into my own closet and slamming the door shut.
Did you feel that?
Oh, I
totally
totally did. I totally felt like, oh my God,
Did you feel like you were betraying yourself at that point?
I felt like I was betraying my friends, all these women who I had been organizing with. I mean, I was on the steering committee, we were all very active, wanting to, make the world equal for girls and women too. And I stopped going to those meetings because I was so embarrassed that I had really, more or less cut myself off from them too. And it was for myself, like I was, slamming the door shut in just a part of myself, that I was just even exploring. I mean, even asking the question. So I no longer thought about like, okay, that's not gonna, I'm not gonna go there ever again. And that's the thing about what I think my own personal growth was as an activist is it's that, when we're talking about freedom, we're talking about equality, we're talking about everybody should be treated as full human beings. And you're saying this and you're not allowing yourself to do that. Like, oh, we can organize around hate, violence. And early in the Vincent Chin movement, we noticed we were only talking about men who were killed, Asian men, and maybe those were the ones who made it into the news. At some point, the women started asking, the Asian women activists were saying, well, what about Asian women? Is it that there are no Asian women who also suffer anti-Asian hate? And but the point I'm trying to make is we start asking questions of all the different places where our identities come forward. What's missing? And what was missing for me was that I wasn't allowing myself to even think of myself as a whole human being, who could fall in love with somebody that I really, felt, that I could love this person, but I don't want to go there. I will never want to think that.
Yeah.
And
So you were denying yourself.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so as I grew more mature and older, I started thinking, this is like, how do you suppress feelings of love? This is somebody I care about. And so that was the point when I actually did fall in love with a woman, and I kept thinking, okay, my community is going to excommunicate me. I was already real involved in, the anti-Asian hate movement. Vincent Chin had already happened, so now we're talking about this wasn't seeping through until I was in my 30s. So a lot of people talk about they come out like when they're, teenager or something like that. I was in my 30s before I began to think, okay, this is, I can't like compartmentalize myself in this way.
Yeah.
And
how do you think it would have been different? Would your life, do you think, have been different if you were able to be
if
honest?
I had not had that lesbian trial?
And also just been open and been willing to embrace that identity earlier.
I'm sure it would have been. But here's the thing about, not having regrets. It's not that, like, I don't blame, I know the people who said that to me. I mean, I actually know them. Some of them are like here in San Francisco. This happened in Boston, but some are here. Some I've run into. The one who said, no, Asian Americans, you can't be homosexual. And he's in Oakland. And so, and one.
Let's go get him.
Yeah. And it was, so here's things, our culture, our society, our community, things happen at a time.
Yeah.
And that's where our movement was at the time, the Asian American movement. Not just the Asian American movement, the whole left of it, in the 1970s and 80s was very homophobic, and that's just, so do I blame them for that? No. But I did run into one of them not that long. I said, hey, do you remember that you said this to me? And I have to say, he said, no, not at all. And that's privilege, right? For them, it was nothing. I mean, it was sort of, they had me on the agenda. Okay, is Helen a lesbian? Okay, check. She said no. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And it was just like nothing to him. Of course, it changed my life.
Yeah, right.
But what he said was, no, I don't remember that at all, but I don't doubt that it happened.
Oh,
He said,
okay.
I don't doubt that it happened. We
Okay.
were very homophobic then.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I actually did run into the black activist who also said that at that trial. He teaches at City College. And he said to me, because I gave this example in a talk I gave, and I mentioned his name, and he came up to me, he says, hi, Helen, I'm, And so, because I don't want you to, like I said, I don't want to blame people. But he said, I never said that. So he said he never said it. We exchanged emails. He said, I could never have said that because my own baby girl is a lesbian. And I'm like, but you did say it. I remember, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, would my life have changed? Yeah, it would have been different, but you know, one thing leads, you
Yeah.
know,
No.
whatever door we go in leads to the next door.
And it shapes us. It shapes us to, you know, to become the people we are now, right?
Right.
All of the, we were talking about
Absolutely.
failures earlier, loss or trauma, you know, pain. This is what makes us who we are. So yes, I believe not in not having a regret either, because you can't do anything about it, right? So.
Right. And you know, the idea that what if my life had been totally beautiful and nothing bad had ever happened, and it was just like smooth and into, you know, the nirvana sunset.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, first of all, nobody's life is like that.
No.
Right?
No.
So, and would I have become an activist if everything was
Right.
so great and I was so privileged to have everything wonderful? Well, you know, I'm happy that I can do things that I hope make a difference, you know?
Well, I think in our pain and our struggles, that's how we can share with one another, right? That is, I was talking about connection earlier. That is how you can connect with other people. You connect because you share, you know, loss or pain or struggle or challenges, right? I don't want to talk to a perfect person, right? That's boring, and it's also like, oh my God, get out of my face. But you know, again, but in seriousness though, that is how you grow closer to people because of that human condition, right?
And just to say the part of compartmentalizing all these things, because, you know, back to the question you said about how they became integrated. I mean, it was because I felt like I had to try to be more of a whole person, because it was hurting me to not be able to when people talk, you know, like they have on TV these programs, everybody is saying what a wonderful weekend they had, and the person in the closet can't say anything. Well, that was me, the person in the closet. My own parents, my family, you know, the people who, my friends, the people who were closest to me. I could not share that I had fallen in love with somebody, and then things didn't work out, and we broke up, and I was heartbroken. And I mean, I was so sad that that's actually when I came out to my closest friends to say, I'm really upset this happened. And you know, and the thing is, people pretty much suspected, I guess, that I was a lesbian, but I would tell them, no, I broke up, and she, blah, blah. It's like, oh, you know, and then they could, you know, be my backup and, you know, and be my dear friends. And the hardest thing was, how do I come out to my community, you know, after being so active and everything, because I kept hearing that voice, and we all have those little voices, you know, you can't be part of our community if you're gay, if you're queer, you know. And so finally what was happening was all the homophobic anti-hate back in the, you know, when HIV was coming, you know, out, and it was so hateful. The slogan then was, come out, come out. If you can come out, you must come out. Silence equals death. That was the slogan. And I thought, that's really true. If I don't speak up, and by then I was working at Ms. Magazine, you know, which was very queer and lesbian friendly, and I wouldn't lose my job. I did have jobs where I could have lost my job. But so I spoke at a convention, an Asian American Journalists Convention, and I had to give a talk, and I
love the story. I love the story. The woman who introduced you?
It was Haley Sterling who introduced me, and I was with Leah at the point, and at that point, we've been married for 32 years, or together for 32 years now, but, you know, we knew we were each other's soulmates, you know, and I knew that the silence equals death. And so I was, you know, in front of this convention, and I was trying to fit in my talk on stereotypes of Asian Americans in the media, about queer stuff. And so I said, I can't work this into my speech. And Leah said, have the introducer do it. And I was like, oh, good idea. So I wrote on a Post-it.
Because at this point, nobody knew that Helen was gay. So
well,
she was trying, in front of this audience, so she was trying to get it into her speech and reveal this. But so then they put it on the person that was introing.
Right, that would have been you, May. So I wrote on a Post-it, Helen is a lesbian. And then I went to the introduce her like 2 minutes before she had to speak. And I said, hey, can you add this to your introduction? To post it. And she said, oh, yeah, sure. And I didn't know she had never said the word lesbian ever before. So she said, Helen Zia is an activist, a feminist. She's a editor at Ms. Magazine, and she's a lesbian. And then she hit the mic, and she said, did you hear that? She's a lesbian. And I'm just sitting back waiting, like, oh, hi, everybody. And anyway, but the point was that I wanted this to be known, so it couldn't be missed.
Yeah.
And it was taped by C-SPAN too. So anyway, so the hardest part was telling my family.
Yeah.
My mother and father. I mean, that was so. By the way, I did not lose any friends out of it. I thought, okay, I'm going to be excommunicated. Terrible things are going to happen. That did not happen. In fact, I felt like I could be more honest with the people I worked most closely with in the community, and then telling my mother, and I started with. You work through, like politically, the people, who would be most welcoming. So I told my sister first, and my sister was like, oh, okay, And so then I told my mother, we're in a car, and I'm like, Mom, I have to tell you something. And I think my sister had already told her, but anyway. But so I said, Mom, my very good friend Leah here, we're actually together. And my mother said, oh, lesbies. I knew some lesbians. My mother's English was not, she had never said lesbian either. So, but so she said, when I was a little girl in China, I think I knew some lesbies. So then she told me that story. Anyway, it was great. My whole family was beautiful.
And I remember when I interviewed you on the podcast, you had said that your mom was just happy. She just wanted you to be happy, and that's what every parent ultimately wants.
Totally.
Right. And that just, I think I got really choked up when you told me that story, because that is the love of a mother or a parent, right? Ultimately, that's all they really care about. And she was genuinely happy for you.
You can actually see my mom being interviewed. KTSF, the Chinese language TV program, came to our wedding because we were one of the very first marriages in 2008. And my mom is there, and they put a microphone in front of my mom and ask her in Chinese, so how do you feel about your daughter marrying another woman? And my mother is very soft-spoken, and she says in Chinese, I'm 80 years old, and I'm so happy because now every one of my children is in a happy, loving relationship. I am so happy.
Yeah.
And how could any parent not love that, right?
Exactly, because that's ultimately what they want. But all right, I think we have to wrap it up here, but I want to thank Helen, as always, for just opening up her soul to us, because that's what, like I said, this is what happens when you get older. You can just say whatever you want and be as honest and truthful as you can be, because life isn't worth it if we can't be honest and open with each other. And this is what I appreciate so much about Helen.
And the whole journey, really, that we're all on, no matter what your journey is, it's about us being whole human beings and being able to be our whole self wherever we are, and insisting on that, demanding that we and our communities can be whole human beings. And there's nothing wrong in insisting on that. And that's what this beautiful conference was about too.
Yes.
That Asian women are strong, Asians are strong. That is who we that's who we are. And that's who we should be able to be.
Yep.
So just thank you all for being here. Thank you to all the organizers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that does bring us to the end of this, the program part of the event, and I think the event is kind of wrapping up, but thank you to all the organizers. Thank you to all of you for attending this fabulous event. I'm sure they're gonna have another one next year, bigger and better every year. But thank you. I hope you guys gained something out of this and some great insight, some takeaway information. But get out there and do your thing, especially as women. Because you know what? This world would be a much better place if women and dogs ruled the world. That's what I think. That's what I think. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is anybody here a teacher? I have this in English, Spanish, and Chinese simplified.
Nice.
Whoever would like
Yeah.
one of, I only have 3, but I would like to give them away.
Sure.